The following audio recording has been designed for learning purposes only. Do not share, distribute, or provide any type of copies, or this audio lesson will not be made available to you. Good luck with today's lesson.
Branch, the presidency, right? So you have the FBI, you have the CIA, you have the DEA, you have all of these departments. You have the Environmental Protection Agency, you have Homeland Security, you have the National Security Agency, you've got all of these executive level, and by executive level I mean they operate out of the executive branch. They're part of the presidency. They were created by congressional legislation, right? Congress creates the CIA, Congress creates the NSA, Congress creates the Environmental Protection Agency through legislation. We are going to do this. We are going to protect, the purpose of this law is to protect the environment and to help stop pollution and so on, and set some standards for what people can and can't do, right? We used to just be able to take our used motor oil and in the river, right? Can't do that anymore. It's delicious, but you can't do it. So we're going to do that. Well, Congress isn't then going to go about the day-to-day shit of having to enforce that law. They're on to the next law. So the legislation that they pass creates an agency within the presidency, and they're going to administer the EPA and decide, are we going to focus on this aspect of the law? Are we going to focus on this aspect of the law? What's the budget going to be for this department? What are they tasked with? Are we going to hire more people? Is there a need? All of that is done at the executive level by the president. Okay, and then Congress is on to the next thing, right? Whether it's naming a post office or reforming healthcare. Okay, so they move on to the next thing. So you have this general constitutional structure. We have three branches of government. They each have different powers. Each is able to check the power of the other to some degree. And so Congress exists within that structure, right? So we read about the Constitution. We understand the structure of the government. This is where Congress is. Okay. So how do we understand it? What are some broad themes that we can think about or return to help us better understand it, right? If you get some specific thing, for example, around how the committee system functions in the House, or what's the purpose of the Rules Committee, or how members are elected, all of these themes, I think, help us kind of understand those questions. Okay. So first, Congress, like all government bodies, is an elite institution. So we learned about the framers' general fear of democracy in the House and the Senate. Okay, and that Congress, we have these two bodies, right? There's the Senate and the House. They were structured in a way that would hopefully protect the elite from the passions of the public and maintain the financial, political, and social domination of wealthy white men. Okay. Now, two things. One, when you say elitism, it's kind of like when people say, oh, the business community, or like businesses or corporations, and we have this idea that all of those are that you can basically say, oh, this is how they all think and behave, when we know that it's not true. You've got a wide range, diversity of opinion, ideas about the future, legislation, how to run a business. The business community is very diverse, right? Elites are diverse. Right? We have people representing who you could say are elites in the House, in the Senate, who take very different positions on things, right? It's not like all the elites are together in one group marching arm in arm yay, we can rule, it. Maybe they do some days, I don't know. But for the most part, right, these are complex institutions. Okay, so that's important. Also, despite the system being designed and the intentions and the concerns of the framers, the system has been not as flexible as people would like, but somewhat flexible, right? As needs arise, as crises come up, as challenges come up, you do have periods in American history where our institutions shift, right? So is it an elite institution? Absolutely, always has been. At the same time, you have, in the 1930s, a massive influx through the electoral process of very pro-worker, pro-labor representatives in the House. And they are helping to get the New Deal through Social Security, protection for unions, minimum wage, overtime protection, and so on, right? Like that happens within this elite institution, okay? You have civil rights legislation in the 1960s that demonstrates a pretty significant shift from where these institutions were before then, right? So I think both of those things are really critical to understand. Like that, yes, it is an elite institution, and we can make some pretty fair and accurate assumptions about how Congress will function based on its elite nature. At the same time, it's also an institution that is susceptible to public opinion and public participation, right? I talked to a guy who was a state representative in the Michigan State House. And he was talking about how they don't usually hear very much from their constituents. They're starting to hear a little bit more actually in the past 5 years or so. But this was a while ago, and he said that, it's like people in my district, if I go out, nobody knows who I am. People know who I am in Lansing, but nobody knows who I am in my district. Nobody's stopping to ask me things. It's I don't get any letters or phone calls. He goes, let me tell you something. If I have a day where I get 10 phone calls from people in the district, even in my state, we're freaking out because nobody calls, right? Oh my God, we got 10 people calling about this issue in the same day. We got to do a press conference. We've got to react to this, right? Because there's so little public participation and public attention. Okay? And so despite being an elite institution, Congress can be shifted. Legislative bodies can be shifted. Because it's an elite institution, it's also often slow, right? You very rarely see Congress really leading on things. Congress is often following something else that's happening, right? 1960s civil rights legislation, that follows decades of organizing and activism and terror and all this stuff that's going on around civil rights. Workers' rights. A lot of that is a response to massive strike waves happening. Do you know what a strike is? Who knows what a strike is?
A bunch of people, yeah.
What?
Like protest?
No, it's more specific.
People that have a certain opinion.
Work.
We agree not to work,
Yeah.
right?
They're trying to protest for they want
Yeah.
some sort of they want
Yeah.
better
Better working conditions
Yeah,
or something,
higher
or
wages or
higher.
something.
Okay. It could be we want to be in a union and you're not recognizing our union. We voted to be in a union, you're not recognizing. It could be that too. The general idea of a strike is when it comes for working people, our greatest power is our ability to just kind of stop and put our hands in our pockets, right? You get these stories all the time, 1930s, there's some machine shop in Detroit, and, the foreman is an asshole, and he comes in and, just berates this guy and, fires him and sends him home on the spot, right? No cause, just other than the foreman didn't like him, right? Sends the guy home. Turns around, everybody in the shop has just gone, powered off all their stuff and are just standing there. He's losing his, steam is coming out of this guy's ears. Get back to work, you motherfucker! And they're bring him back to work. We'll get back to work. That's it.
I love that.
It's so lovely. I love that stuff. Anyway,
That's your greatest power.
But do you know what I'm saying? It is, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do. Those of us with jobs, if somebody says to you, hey, man, things are really bad here. We need to blah blah blah. You're I got rent, I got a car payment, I got, my girlfriend likes to do things sometimes. Like, I can't lose this job. It took me 6 months to find this one. Like, no. Yeah, handle it yourself. Like, do your thing, but leave me out of it. Like, that's understandable, man. Like, don't drag me into your problem. I'm trying to work and make a living here, right? That's always been an issue. Always been an issue. But anyway, this is happening in response to that. The legislation we get in the 1930s is a response to what has been happening for several years in the U.S., right? Anyway, so an elite institution. The framers separated the legislative and executive functions of government. You have this, in a way, when we think laws, we think Congress when we think laws, but we should also think the executive branch, because they're the ones enforcing and administering them, right? You can have any law you want. If there's no police on the beat to enforce it, the law doesn't mean anything. So the president and the Congress are, on the one hand, they're connected and coordinated in a way that, especially around laws, that is pretty remarkable and complex. At the same time, they're also, the president has this that they want to do, and Congress is like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Right? The president, when President Trump ran for office, one of the things he promised was that he was going to build a wall along the border, the southern border between the United States and Mexico. Congress has not been willing to fund that, right? To what would be required to build a wall, the amount required, Congress is giving like a tiny percentage. Like, yeah, okay, this can, most of what it's been used for is just repairing or updating existing wall. So that's been a struggle, right? Because you have the president on the one hand saying, look, I ran for office, I campaigned on this, I need to deliver, right? This is something that we need as a matter of public policy, and Congress won't do it, right? So there's that struggle for power there.
But I heard he's funding some of it too.
This is where we get into some of the complexities, right? Because the president, as somebody whose job it is to administer and enforce the law, they have a lot of discretion. Some courts disagree or agree with this. There's a question about it. How much discretion does the president have? But the president can say, all right, we have all this money in the military budget. The border wall is a national security issue. Therefore, that relates to the military. We had X amount of $1 billion set aside for this. I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it toward wall funding, right? Which, from Congress's perspective, is like, whoa!
Good luck with today's lesson.